Hello there voltage modular people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel. We're going to be looking at AutoSense Poly, and we'll be looking at control pad as well. We'll be using the big meter, and these are here for demonstrations purposes only. AutoSense has 6 inputs. The purpose of this device is when it detects a change, it will actually make that the enabled port and then obviously push that data to the output port. So it's a bit like it isn't like an auto switch. It has a priority from the lowest on the low port to the highest on that high port. So it's deliberately done that way so you don't forget. So if the signal came in on this port and on this one at the same time, this would be the active one. So whatever's higher up, that's going to be the actual active port which will actually send out. This does have this little orange ring which will move around, where you see when we're demonstrating it, to say which one is the actual active port. As I say, we can ignore zeros, so if this voltage dropped to a 0, it won't actually activate this port, whereas obviously this was off and this port was active and this cable dropped to a 0, it'll actually make that the active port. Just in case you're thinking, oh, does 0 really matter? Well, it does, because if you've got pushing in note data, 0 happens to be, is it C2, C1? So it's actually or MIDI 36, so it is actually obviously a note, so it is important in that particular case. PolySense, it's only got 5 inputs rather than 6, but it's working on the same principle. As soon as there's a change, it will switch everything to that cable. The big difference is we've got this per voice, so with the per voice it'll actually look at the cables inside the poly cables, so it could be that voice number 4 on this one changed, 5 on this one, 2 on that one, 1 on that one, and it'll take them appropriately and send them out. The only thing to think about or remind yourself about poly stuff, depending where the source comes from, they might round robin, so the data is a little bit bizarre what can go into these things, but at the same time that's what makes that a little bit of fun. This is control pad. It's got 64 buttons. It has an output range of some note values, a 1 volt, 5 volt, and a -5 and a +5. Basically, it's going to be this range divided by the maximum number of buttons. As default, this is usually on 127, so it sort of falls in line with a bit more of what I call the MIDI range. So if I was to put this onto layout number 2, which obviously changes the numbers into the next sort of range, and hit 127, because we're on 1 volt, that would be 1 volt. So if I was just to quickly plug that in to my big meter, there is our 1 volt. And obviously if I was to move that to 5 volt, it'd turn to 5. And -5 +5, it'd be 5 as well. Obviously, if I was to put it onto 64 and then go back to 0, it would be a -5, and as I push this up, that would turn to 0 for a 5 volt, and that would stay on a 0 for 1 volt. And if we go to the note, I'm now into the note range, and we can push the note range into a really stupid note range, like here we go, like G66, or even go up to, there we go, the highest one there would be D-84. But bear in mind, if you was up here and you decided to change your max buttons when you're in note range, it defaults back to numbers because you're no longer in the correct scaling for notes. Even though we're up to a really stupid scale, very, very high up, but you're out of a correct scaling. So you have to have this on 127 on the note range for the notes to be correct. When we come to the voltages, yeah, as I say, it'd be this figure here is going to be this voltage is going to be divided by this figure. So whereas before we was on number 2, we went to 127, which was showing us a volt. It's now obviously 0.49, and I'd need to push this up to 255 to get your full volt. So basically, the higher this number, the smaller the range will be between your 2 buttons. So as you go up and up and up, there's going to be a small range between these 2 buttons, and when you come down, there'll be a larger range between them 2 buttons. Now, AutoSense was kind of built because of my control pad. So before I just switch on to AutoSense, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to plug this into, this is my preset stepper, and this is kind of the reason why I built it, was I could come along here and I could very easily just select, so I'm selecting 18, you can see it's changing to 18, 26. So it was nice and quick, and that's what I wanted. Because what I found was, and in fact, let me unplug that if it's going to confuse things. sometimes, well, actually it's being nice to me today, but if I was in a rush and I wanted to get to 8 very quickly, oh, I went a bit too fast. Well, there you go. I went shooting over and I had to come back. Whereas obviously with this sort of thing, if that was plugged in, we're on 34, I want an 8, I can just click the button and I know I've gone instantly there, you know, there's 21, I can instantly sort of go there. So that's what I find it quite handy for. And you know, and it works with other devices I've got. So here I can set my thresholds, say on my flip-flop counter. One of the pains about the flip-flop counter, I built the way this scrolled in such a way that you could easily get to your numbers. But it does go up to 999 and you can take ages to scroll up. So you could plug this into here, push that all the way up, and look, here we go, look, we're getting up to the big numbers already. So there we go, on 9999, and I could unplug that and I'm now up at the higher end. So you could use that as like a little bit of a cheat. Or I can come whizzing down, and here we go, we're now whizzing down into this sort of range. But that's the sort of principle that I can sort of get to these numbers. But as you can see, even on this one here, this one goes up to 127, and we've only got 63. Well, quite straightforward. I'm just going to bring Auto Sense down here a second, and I'm just going to move my control pad over just a little bit. And we're going out of control, so let's hold down my Alt key and make a copy of this, and let me just scroll the screen back up again, so we've got everything on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this on layout 2. So we've got from 0 to 63 and then 64 to 127. I'm going to take this output here, plug it into there, and I'm going to take this output here, plug it into there, and I'm going to then take my AutoSense output and let's plug it, say, into my voltage stepper. So it's on 127. This is the last port active. So there we go. There's 100. Last port active over here. Let's click on 30. Now we're now on 30, and you can see the orange sort of moves around as well. So as I click on 90, we're back over to this side. And so that's the principle, really, of how AutoSense can work. Very, very straightforward. As I say, don't forget, we can go up to a lot higher numbers on this, so we can obviously take this control pad and duplicate it again, and we can change the max buttons, and we can do all sorts of other things what we want to. But this is AutoSense sort of working, and we can obviously have it pushed into there. I mean, we could, as I say, we could have this coming over into this one here as well. So we can change the thresholds over here and say, oh, actually, I'm actually interested in having that threshold. Let me give that a bit of trigger information so we can obviously trigger it. And I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put it into there. So now my flip-flop counter is going to be moving up to 5 in the step and then going back to 1. And then I could on the fly say, actually, no, I want 14 steps now. So now it's going to have to count up to 14 steps. And it'll change this to the 14 steps as well. So this is it all sort of coming together, which is obviously quite nice. As I say, with the AutoSense Poly, very straightforward stuff. We could have some chord stuff coming here, which is now stopped playing. Then I could have my keyboard coming in. In fact, hey, let's plug in my keyboard. I think I can. Am I in the wrong thing? Let's try this one here. So I clicked on the wrong screen, as I usually do. So I've got some pitch here. So I'm just going to stretch across, and I'm going to play my keyboard, and in fact I'm gonna just take this out of here and plug that onto the out so we can see the results coming in here. So as I'm playing my keyboard, he says, and we've got the results coming up the top. So that's my keyboard playing, and then as I say, I then can come in here and start clicking on these. So that's taken over. Now my keyboard's taken over, and then that one's taken over. So yeah, so AutoSense is one of these little, it is a real silly little modular device, but it's one I'm actually reaching for all the time at the moment because I just find it so handy. And I say, and my control pads, I'm finding them really useful for actually controlling a lot of other stuff in the background. So I am actually using this sort of configuration, and I might have another configuration like I'm using this one to actually control this. Well, there's nothing stopping me. Well, at the moment it's obviously controlling that one there, but if I was to put that into there, so these are now going to control this one here, I could take this out and put it over here as well. So I can manually select the slot I want, but then obviously when my flip-flop counter is counting up, it's now taken over and it's doing what it wants to do. So let's bring that down a little bit. So it's just doing its simple loop, but at the same time we can go over the top of it, and I can play my keyboard and I can select things up on there. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.